I want to start my speech this morning, Sir Christopher, by briefly setting out what ATAS is, because if there's one thing I've learned in the last few months, it's that there is quite a low salience about it, and including, I regret to say, in the Foreign Office itself. And I hope if this debate achieves nothing else, it resolves that. ATAS, known properly as the Academic Technology Approval Scheme, is a system by which additional checks are carried on international students and researchers of certain nationalities or those working in security-related fields. It's clearly an incredibly important process, and one which exists in some form or other in most other countries where advanced research is taking place. And ATAS checks are most commonly needed when individuals are going to be studying, researching or working in subject topics that could be used to develop advanced conventional military technology, weapons of mass destruction or indeed their delivery systems. So an obvious reason why it is important to get ATAS right, because also the type of research which in the wrong hands could be used to develop weapons of mass destruction, for example, is also the type of research which is critical for making many non-military advancements. For example, biophysics research and molecular medicine involves groundbreaking discoveries in diagnosis and treatment of diseases which change the lives of millions of people. Creating novel chemical materials could revolutionise food packaging and how it is recycled. We all know we need better energy systems and sources, and buses, for example, commonly run now on hydrogen. A move in Scotland, I'm proud to say, was supported by the experts at the University of St Andrews in my constituency within its School of Chemistry. And then, Sir Christopher, there is AI. We know it is having a huge impact on how we live our lives. And I really want to make sure that the best and brightest are here in the UK working on it, ensuring the development of AI includes the necessary guardrails to prevent its abuse. And these are just a few examples of research subjects which could require ATAS approval for an international student or academic. But my point, Sir Christopher, is this. If we want the UK to be world leaders in research and development, which is key to the government's modern industrial strategy, then we need to attract the brightest and the best. And we can't do that if the security checks needed for their visas to be processed isn't working. Now, the Minister wrote to me last week, I'm very grateful, confirming a standard timeframe of 30 working days, 6 weeks to process applications. And I'd say that that seems quite reasonable for something technical that we clearly want to get right. But the problem is that response timescale isn't exactly everyone's experience. I've had casework for academics and students coming to the University of St Andrews with delays of up to 6 months, and an experience that is shared by the Russell Group of universities who reached out to me in advance of this debate. And I know processing delays aren't anything new, but there are just a few elements I want to pull out here. Most postgraduate programmes of study and research programmes have defined start and end dates, and that is particularly true when grant funding is being utilised. Missing those start dates due to ATAS delays means that research students miss the start of their course, and that research projects might need to delay their start dates or begin without key personnel. I certainly know for the University of St Andrews that they will not make a formal offer without the ATS being completed, and the student can't apply for their visa without receiving that formal offer for the university. So these are different roadblocks in the way to getting approval. Sir Christopher, can you imagine securing the funding for a groundbreaking piece of research and having attracted the best global talent, having to find out that days before the project is due to start, you still don't know if you can go ahead, and you find yourself having to go back to the finance provider to ask for leniency, change contract dates and funding arrangements, and all, of course, worrying whether that funding might ultimately be withdrawn, and that could jeopardise your chances of receiving future support, or that the individual in question might give up on the process and secure employment elsewhere. And whilst I'm relieved that in my conversations with the University of St Andrews, it has managed to deal with the stress of these concerns but not the losses themselves, I have been told by the Russell Group of other universities who have experienced researchers and students withdrawing applications and going to other research-intensive nations instead, and large R&D businesses withdrawing from university-led projects because they could not wait any longer for applications to be approved. So I asked the Minister then whether the 30-day standard period is a reasonable reflection of capacity. Would a 40 or even 50-day target be better, perhaps, and then universities and applicants can plan accordingly? And could this be put into a formal service level agreement so that universities, applicants and funding providers can manage expectations? There are naturally peaks to the number of applications for review over the summer period, given that the academic cycle, even for non-taught research, tends to start in the autumn. Are there steps the government could be taking to prepare for this? Are there extra resources that could be put in place? And I understand the highly technical nature of the checks being carried out means that scientific experts are needed who are already in high demand at Whitehall. Does the Minister feel that the FCDO has sufficient scientific capacity to meet demand? Is this something that engagement with the university sector and the specialists we have here could perhaps resolve? Now, Sir Christopher, I mentioned casework because as an MP that is a huge part of what our job is. Visa problems, DWP issues, HMRC delays, these are the bread and butter of our inbox and the work our constituency staff does. Trying to find out the problem and what can be done to unstick it, whatever is stuck. But frustratingly, we cannot do this with ATS. There is just one email address for it, for use by universities, MPs, students, or indeed anyone else who needs to get in touch. I'm not sure I've actually ever received a response from it. I'm not surprised, it must be absolutely inundated. Surely there must be a better system. I know I'd rather we didn't have delays with visas or pensions, which my team have to chase up on constituents' behalf, but it's at least something we can do, which can give some answers to why things are moving slowly and when indeed an answer can be expected. Would the Minister look into an MP hotline or a dedicated email for use by registered universities? And we can, of course, get in touch with the Home Office as these ATS delays stop visas being processed, but this doesn't help at all with UKVI officials left as in the dark as everyone else over the status of an ATS check. Like us, all they can do is wait. The opacity of the system was thrown into sharp relief for me towards the end of last year with one particular piece of casework. My constituent, an academic at the University of St Andrews, was applying for his visa to be renewed. This was all completely routine. But tragically, having submitted all the information and with the ATS checks underway, his father unexpectedly took ill and then passed away. He naturally wanted to travel home to Syria to see his family, pay respects and indeed as the eldest son to arrange and play a part in his father's funeral. He immediately contacted UKVI and asked for permission to travel. The next developments, I understand, are out with the remit of the Minister and why we're here today, but they are worth noting. There doesn't seem to be a Home Office exemption to allow for time-limited bereavement travel, even where evidence of death has been provided. And the UKVI escalation process, while effective, is still slow in consideration of the cultural norms for burial soon after death in many countries. And all this means that my constituent had missed his father's funeral before any answers had been received. Nonetheless, he still wanted to return home, be with his family and pay his respects as soon as possible. And this is where we return to ATAS, because he was told that if he left the country, he would need to start his visa and ATS applications all over again. That would require him to incur significant costs and uncertainty and risk serious disruption to his ongoing academic responsibilities. The only option, we were told by the Home Office, was to try and get his visa renewal through as quickly as possible, leaving that one big stumbling block, the inability to directly contact, chase or otherwise check in with ATS over his security checks. Without knowing how long the current waiting period was and without ATS having any guidance or grounds for expedition in compassionate circumstances. Now, my team are a pretty resourceful bunch. They tried everything they could think of. They obviously emailed the public email address. We wrote to the FCDO. We rang the FCDO's helpline. And I was told on that phone call that the FCO did not know what ATS was and whether it was part of their remit. That's a bit worrying. When explained, we were asked that surely this should be the responsibility of the Home Office. It went on. Now, there is a positive ending in this case. Although my constituent missed the funeral, as I've outlined, and that initial mourning period, his checks did go through and his visa was renewed. He was able to see his mother and sister and pay his respects to his father. I'm not convinced that anything that my office did, or indeed myself, because I did try to speak to a couple of FCDO ministers in the House, actually did anything in that regard. And I know that the Minister will point out that in the end my constituent ATS checks were done within the 6-week processing window. It is true that this is not one of the cases of terrible delays which I referred to earlier. But it clearly demonstrates, Sir Christopher, the need for an escalation routes for MPs or sponsoring universities, the need for the transparent processing timeframes, the need for a compassionate travel route or other allowances for bereaved applicants, or at least knowledge of what the process can and should be and whether indeed it's possible at all. And above all, some form of knowledge or oversight within the FCDO, given that nobody seemed to know that ATS existed or was an FCDO responsibility. So, Christopher, something called the Academic Technology Approval Scheme might be incredibly dry, But I hope what this debate demonstrates is that it is incredibly important. It's important for our industrial strategy, medical breakthroughs, securing our energy future, supporting our universities and indeed overall our security as a nation. But it is also about people. These issues are not minor. Roughly a quarter of the University of St Andrews skilled workers visa applications last year involved ATAS checks, and a tenth of the ATAS students had their start dates impacted. And as proud as I am of the university, I know it isn't the only top-level research centre in the UK. If we multiply up those figures, we're looking at thousands of delays and research projects impacted, time lost and potentially money lost too. So I hope the Minister will use her time today to set out how we can address these issues and bring ATAS and its processes into the light.